The knock came at midnight during the worst blizzard Malad City, Idaho had seen in 20 years, and Yates Kincaid was half drunk on whiskey when he stumbled to the door of his ranch house with his rifle in hand, expecting trouble. What he found instead was a young woman collapsed on his porch steps, her lips blue with cold, clutching a bundle of blankets that contained the smallest, most pitiful baby he had ever seen in his 30 years of life. Snow whipped around them both in furious white sheets, and for a moment, Yates just stood there in his Union suit and boots, staring down at this impossible scene while the December wind of 1882 howled through the darkness like something alive and angry. The woman lifted her head, and even through the veil of snow he could see the desperate plea in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible over the storm. "Please help us." Yates dropped his rifle and hauled her up by her arms, dragging her inside while she kept that baby clutched against her chest like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. He kicked the door shut behind them, and the sudden absence of wind felt like a blessing. The woman swayed on her feet, and he caught her before she fell, guiding her toward the fireplace where embers still glowed orange in the darkness. She was so thin he could feel every bone in her body through her threadbare dress, and the baby made small, mewling sounds that reminded him of a newborn calf. "Sit," he commanded, pushing her into his only good chair. She obeyed without protest, her whole body shaking so violently he could hear her teeth chattering. Yates lit a lamp with trembling hands, his mind racing. He had no experience with women or babies. He had lived alone on this cattle ranch for 5 years, ever since his father died and left him this piece of land and a small herd to manage. His life consisted of hard work, harder winters, and the occasional trip into town for supplies and whiskey. This was so far outside his understanding of the world that he felt like he had stepped into someone else's life. In the lamplight, he could see her properly now. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark blonde hair that hung in wet tangles around a face that might have been pretty if it was not so gaunt and pale. Her dress was little more than rags, patched and repatched, and she wore no coat despite the killing cold outside. The baby she held was wrapped in what looked like pieces of old flour sacks, and when Yates leaned closer he saw it could not be more than a few weeks old. "What the hell are you doing out in this storm?" he asked, then immediately regretted his harsh tone when she flinched. He tried again, softer. "Who are you, Diana?" she said through chattering teeth. "Diana Harper. I walked from town. I had nowhere else to go. You walked. That is 5 miles in a blizzard. You could have died. You both could have died." Yates moved around his small house with purpose now, pulling blankets from his bed, stoking the fire higher, putting a kettle on to boil. "Why did you come here?" Diana looked down at the baby in her arms and her face crumpled. "Because nobody in town would help us. This baby, she does not belong to me. Her mother died giving birth 2 weeks ago, and her father wants nothing to do with her. He said she was proof of his wife's sin, that she could not be his because he had been gone for a year working the railroad. He threw us both out. I was the midwife who delivered her, and I could not let her die, so I took her with me. And your family, dead. My parents died of typhoid 3 years ago. I have been surviving on what work I could find, but nobody wants a midwife who is not married. They say it is not decent." She looked up at him with eyes that held so much exhaustion it made his chest ache. "I tried every house in town. Everyone turned us away. They said the baby should go to the orphanage in Pocatello, but I heard stories about that place. Children die there all the time from cold and sickness. I could not send her to that fate. So you thought you would try the crazy hermit rancher out in the middle of nowhere." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I heard you were kind. Mrs. Patterson at the general store said you once paid for medicine for her son when she had no money. She said you acted gruff, but you had a good heart. I was gambling everything on that being true." Yates rubbed his face with both hands. He felt overwhelmed and underprepared for this entire situation. The kettle began to whistle and he pulled it from the heat, pouring hot water into a basin. He found his cleanest towel and brought it over to Diana. "Get yourself warm. I will find something for you to wear that is not frozen solid." He retreated to his bedroom and dug through his trunk until he found one of his father's old shirts and a pair of wool socks. It was not much, but it would be warmer than her wet dress. When he returned to the main room, Diana was crying silently while she tried to warm the baby against her chest. The infant was making thin, hungry sounds that cut straight through him. "She needs to eat," Diana said desperately. "I have been trying to feed her with a rag soaked in milk, but I ran out 2 days ago. I have not eaten myself in 3 days. I spent my last coins on milk for her." Something shifted in Yates then, some fundamental change in how he saw the world. Here was this young woman who had sacrificed everything, even her own survival, to save a child nobody wanted. She had walked 5 miles through a deadly blizzard on the slim hope that a stranger might have mercy. The sheer courage of it staggered him. "I have a milk cow," he said. "I will get milk for the baby. You change into these dry clothes and get warm." He pulled on his heavy coat and hat, wrapped a scarf around his face, and forced himself back out into the storm. The cold hit him like a fist, and he had to lean into the wind to make any progress toward the barn. Snow had drifted 3 feet high against the door, and he dug it clear with his hands before he could get inside. His 4 horses and dozen cattle were huddled together for warmth, their breath creating clouds of steam in the dim interior. The milk cow loaded him in protest when he brought the pail and stool, but he worked quickly, his fingers so cold they barely functioned. When he had enough milk to fill his small pail, he checked on the other animals, threw down extra hay, and fought his way back to the house. Ice had formed in his beard and his lungs burned from breathing the frigid air. Inside, Diana had changed into his father's shirt, which hung on her like a tent. She had moved closer to the fire and unwrapped the baby, checking her over with gentle, practiced hands. Yates could see the infant was a tiny thing, wrinkled and red, with a dusting of dark hair on her head. She was crying in earnest now, a weak sound that nevertheless held impressive determination. "Here," he said, thrusting the pail at Diana. She took it with a gasp of relief. "Do you have a clean cloth? And a bottle with a nipple if possible." "I have cloth." "No bottle." Yates found a clean dish towel and brought it to her. Diana tore a strip from it, soaked it in the milk, and carefully squeezed drops into the baby's mouth. The infant latched onto the cloth immediately, sucking hard. Diana laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief that filled the small house with unexpected warmth. "There you go, sweet girl, there you go. I know you are hungry, I know." Yates stood awkwardly by, unsure what to do with himself. He was not a man accustomed to company. His days followed a routine of work and solitude that suited him just fine. Or at least it had until tonight. Now his house felt different, alive with something he could not name. He found himself watching Diana as she fed the baby with infinite patience, murmuring soft words of comfort. There was something beautiful in her gentleness, in the way she cradled this unwanted child as if it was the most precious thing in the world. "What is her name?" he asked finally. Diana looked up at him. "She does not have one. Her father refused to name her. I have been calling her Rose in my head, but I have no right to name her. She is not mine. She is not anybody's, seems like, except yours now. I cannot keep her. I have no money, no home, no way to care for her properly. I was hoping you might know someone who could take her in. a family with means who could give her a good life. Diana's voice broke on the last word. I do not want to give her up, but I want what is best for her. Yates pulled his other chair over and sat down heavily. His mind was working through possibilities, and most of them were grim. He knew every family within 20 miles of here, and he could not think of a single one that would take in an infant under these circumstances. Times were hard and mouths to feed were expensive. A baby with questionable parentage would be seen as bad luck at best, and at worst a burden nobody needed. I do not know of anyone, he said honestly. Most folks around here are barely getting by themselves. The orphanage might be the only option. No, Diana's voice was fierce. I will not send her there to die. I will find another way. What way? You said yourself you have no money and no home. Then I will work. I will find a job somewhere, anywhere. I will take her west to California if I must. I heard there are more opportunities there. Diana. Yates waited until she looked at him. You cannot even walk 5 miles in a storm without nearly dying. How do you think you will make it to California with a newborn baby and no supplies? Be realistic. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her jaw was set with stubborn determination. I will find a way. I have to. This baby deserves a chance at life. Her mother died bringing her into this world. That has to mean something. She cannot die because no one wants her. The baby had stopped sucking and was falling asleep, milk drunk and finally content. Diana held her close and pressed a kiss to her forehead. The sight of it did something strange to Yates's chest, made it feel tight and full at the same time. He thought about his own mother, dead these 15 years from a fever. He thought about how she used to hold him when he was small, before life on the frontier hardened them both. He thought about how empty this house had been, how empty his life had been, and how suddenly it did not feel empty anymore. An idea was forming in his head, insane and improbable, but once it took root he could not shake it loose. Stay here, he said abruptly. Diana blinked at him in confusion. What? Stay here, both of you. At least until the storm passes and you get your strength back. After that, we can figure out what to do next. I cannot impose on you like that. You already did by knocking on my door half frozen. Might as well finish the job. He tried to make his voice light, but his heart was hammering. I have a spare room. Well, it is more of a storage room, but there is space for a bed. You can help around the house in exchange for room and board. I am not much of a cook, and this place could use a woman's touch. I would be grateful for any help you can offer, Diana said carefully. But I cannot stay long term. It would not be proper, an unmarried woman living with an unmarried man. People would talk. People always talk, usually about nothing that matters. Yates stood and moved to the window, looking out at the wall of white beyond the glass. Storm like this, nobody is going anywhere for at least a few days anyway. Let us just get through that first. Diana nodded slowly. The baby was fully asleep now, her tiny face peaceful. Thank you, Mr. Kincaid. You are saving our lives. I will find a way to repay you, I swear it. Call me Yates, and you do not owe me anything. He turned back to face her. Get some sleep. You look like you are about to fall over. He meant to set her up in the spare room, but when he looked at the cluttered space filled with tools and tack and 5 years of accumulated junk, he realized it would take hours to clear out. Instead, he gave her his bed with fresh sheets and took the spare room himself, pushing aside enough debris to roll out a bedroll on the floor. It was uncomfortable and cold, but he had slept in worse conditions on cattle drives. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind howl outside and the softer sounds of Diana and the baby settling into sleep. His whole life had changed in the span of an hour, and he could not quite wrap his mind around it. By morning, he would probably realize what a foolish thing he had done, inviting strangers to stay in his home. But tonight, in the darkness, it felt like the only right thing he had done in a very long time. The storm raged for 3 days straight, trapping them all inside. Yates spent those days clearing out the spare room and fixing up a proper bed frame he found in the barn. Diana helped when she could, but she was still weak from cold and hunger, and the baby needed constant attention. He watched her work tirelessly, feeding Rose every few hours with soaked cloth and milk, changing her improvised diapers made from torn sheets, singing to her in a soft voice that filled the house with unexpected music. They fell into an easy rhythm despite the strangeness of their situation. Yates did the heavy work and tended the animals, while Diana cooked simple meals and kept the fire going. They did not talk much at first, both of them naturally quiet people, but gradually they began to share pieces of their stories. Diana told him about growing up in Malad City as the daughter of a shopkeeper, about learning midwifery from the old German woman who lived on the edge of town, about the slow collapse of her life after her parents died. Yates told her about his father, a stern man who had claimed this land through the Homestead Act and built everything from nothing, about his mother's death and how his father never really recovered from it, working himself into an early grave 5 years ago, about the loneliness of running a ranch alone, of days where he did not speak a word out loud because there was nobody to hear it. On the third evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Diana asked him the question he had been dreading. "Why did you really let us stay? You could have turned us away like everyone else did." Yates was quiet for a long time, watching flames dance in the hearth. "When I was 10, my mother got pregnant again. It was a hard pregnancy and the baby came early, a little boy. He only lived 2 hours. He swallowed hard against the old pain. I remember holding him, this tiny thing, and thinking he was perfect. My mother cried for weeks after. My father never spoke of it again. It was like that baby never existed. But I never forgot him, or how it felt to know that someone so small could just disappear from the world like they never mattered." He looked at Diana and found her eyes shining with unshed tears. "When I saw you on my porch with that baby, both of you nearly dead from the cold, I thought about my brother. I thought about how he deserved better than 2 hours of life in a world that did not want him. I could not let the same thing happen to Rose. Does that make sense?" "Yes," Diana whispered. "That makes perfect sense." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Yates realized he was staring at her, really seeing her for the first time since she had stumbled into his life. The color had returned to her cheeks, and the desperate edge of starvation had faded from her face. She was pretty, he thought, with fine features and expressive eyes the color of honey. But more than that, she had a strength in her that called to something in his own soul. She had walked through a blizzard to save a child. She had refused to give up even when the whole world turned its back. That took a kind of courage he could only admire. Diana ducked her head as if she could read his thoughts, and he looked away quickly, feeling heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the fire. The storm broke on the 4th day, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of snow that sparkled in brilliant sunshine. Yates spent the morning digging paths to the barn and the well, working until his back ached and sweat froze on his skin despite the cold. When he came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, he found Diana at the stove making coffee. Rose was asleep in a basket they had rigged up, wrapped in the warmest blankets they could find. "I need to go into town," Diana said without preamble. "I have been thinking about it. I need to see if I can find work, and we need supplies for Rose, proper bottles and cloth for diapers at minimum. I can get supplies when I go in next week. Yates, I cannot keep taking your charity. You have done so much already. I need to start supporting myself and Rose. He poured himself coffee and cradled the mug in his cold hands. "What kind of work are you going to find? You said yourself nobody wants an unmarried midwife. Then I will wash laundry or clean houses or work in the saloon serving drinks. Whatever it takes. You work in the saloon and nobody will ever respect you again. You know how this town is." Diana's face flushed with anger. "What choice do I have? I cannot live off your generosity forever." "Why not?" The question hung in the air between them. Diana stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Because it is not proper, because people will talk, because I have to take care of Rose myself." "What if you did not have to do it alone?" Yates set down his coffee and took a breath, plunging forward before he could lose his nerve. "What if you stayed here permanently? Both of you. I could use the help running this place and Rose would be safe and provided for." "You are talking about me being your housekeeper." "I am talking about you being my wife." The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Diana's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Rose stirred in her basket and made a small sound but did not wake. Outside, snow slid off the roof with a soft thump. "You cannot be serious," Diana finally managed. "I am completely serious. Think about it. You need a home and security for Rose. I need someone to help with this place and I am tired of being alone. We get along well enough." "It makes practical sense." "Practical sense." Diana's voice rose. "Yates, marriage is supposed to be about love, not practical sense." "Is it? How many people do you know who married for love versus marrying because it was the sensible thing to do?" "My parents' marriage was arranged by their families. They learned to care for each other over time. It worked out fine. I cannot marry you. We barely know each other. You are doing this out of pity." "I am not." He moved closer to her, wanting her to understand. "Diana, I have been alone for 5 years. I thought that was what I wanted, but this past week has shown me I was wrong. Coming home to a warm house with you and Rose in it, it feels right. It feels like what life is supposed to be. I am not asking for your love. I am offering you partnership and protection. The rest can come in time or not at all. At least you and Rose would be safe." Diana wrapped her arms around herself and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. "This is insane." "Maybe. But is it more insane than walking 5 miles through a blizzard with a newborn baby?" She laughed, a sound somewhere between humor and hysteria. "You make a fair point." She was quiet for a long moment, her breath fogging the glass. "If I said yes, what would you expect from me?" "Help running the household, company at meals, someone to talk to at the end of the day. I would not expect you to share my bed until you were ready if you ever were. I am not that kind of man. What about Rose? I would raise her as my own daughter. She would have my name and my protection. Nobody would ever be able to take her from us or send her to an orphanage." Diana turned to face him and he could see she was crying. "Why are you doing this? The real reason." Yates searched for the right words. "Because when I opened that door and saw you both, something woke up in me that I thought was dead. Because I looked at Rose and saw my brother who never got a chance. Because you are the bravest person I have ever met, and I do not want you to disappear from my life." He swallowed hard. "Because in 4 days you have made me happier than I have been in 5 years, and I think maybe we could make something good here, together." Fresh tears spilled down Diana's cheeks. "I do not love you, I know. But I could, maybe. In time. You are a good man, Yates Kincaid. Better than I had any right to hope for. Is that a yes?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and laughed again, more steadily this time. "I must be crazy, but yes. Yes, I will marry you." Yates felt something expand in his chest, a feeling he could not quite name, but that felt like the first warm day after a long winter. He crossed the room and took Diana's hands in his, careful and gentle. They were small and work-roughened, but they held his with surprising strength. "I will do right by you," he promised. "Both of you, I swear it." "I believe you," Diana said, and when she smiled at him, he thought maybe he was already halfway to falling in love. They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who came through Malad City on his monthly rounds. It was a simple ceremony in the small church, with only a handful of witnesses. Yates wore his best suit, brushed clean of dust, and Diana wore a dress borrowed from Mrs. Patterson at the general store, the only woman in town who had been kind to her. Rose slept through the entire ceremony, wrapped in a blanket in Mrs. Patterson's arms. The townspeople had plenty to say about the wedding. Yates heard the whispers as they walked through town afterward to buy supplies. Diana Harper marrying that hermit rancher after showing up with another woman's baby and no explanation. It was not decent, they said. The whole thing was suspicious. That baby was probably hers all along, and she had made up the story about the father rejecting it. Yates ignored the gossip and kept Diana close to his side, but he could feel her trembling with shame and anger. "Let them talk," he murmured as they loaded supplies into his wagon. "We know the truth, and that is what matters." "They think Rose is mine," Diana said quietly. "They think I am a loose woman who trapped you into marriage. Then they are idiots." Yates helped her up into the wagon seat and climbed up beside her. "Rose is ours now. That makes her mine as much as yours. Let them think whatever they want." The drive back to the ranch was cold but clear, the road packed down by the traffic of the past week. Rose woke halfway home and started crying, and Diana fed her with a proper bottle they had bought in town, milk dribbling down the baby's chin. Yates glanced over at his new wife and felt that unfamiliar warmth in his chest again. She was his wife now. He had a family. The reality of it was still sinking in. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Yates had worried it would be awkward, two strangers suddenly sharing a home and a life, but Diana had a practical nature that matched his own. She took over the cooking and cleaning, transformed the spare room into a nursery for Rose, and even helped him with the lighter ranch work like feeding chickens and gathering eggs. In return, Yates worked from dawn to dusk to make sure they had everything they needed. He sold 2 steers in town to buy proper furniture for the nursery and warm clothes for Diana and Rose. He fixed the drafty windows and reinforced the roof before the next storm could hit. At night, they sat together by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Diana told him stories about the babies she had delivered over the years, the nervous fathers and the women who bore pain with quiet strength. Yates told her about ranching, about the hard years when cattle died from disease, and the good years when calves were born healthy and strong. They never ran out of things to say to each other, and when silence fell, it was comfortable rather than awkward. True to his word, Yates did not pressure Diana to share his bed. He slept in the room that had been his father's study, with a narrow cot and a single window. It was not comfortable, but he would not have traded it for anything because it meant Diana felt safe in his house. Some nights he lay awake and listened to her moving around in the room above his, heard her soft voice singing lullabies to Rose, and felt content in a way he never had before. Rose grew and thrived under their care. Within a few weeks, her wrinkled newborn appearance gave way to chubbier cheeks and bright, curious eyes. She started making little cooing sounds that delighted Diana and made Yates grin foolishly. He found himself hurrying through his work so he could come inside and see what new thing Rose had learned. She gripped his finger with surprising strength when he held her, and he felt his heart clench with protective love. Winter deepened, and they were snowed in more often than not, but Yates did not mind. The 3 of them created their own small world within the walls of the ranch house. Diana taught him how to hold Rose properly, how to rock her when she was fussy, how to tell the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry. He taught Diana how to read the weather, how to tell when a storm was coming by the smell of the air and the behavior of the animals. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, became comfortable in each other's presence in a way that felt natural and right. February brought a thaw that melted some of the snow and made the roads passable again. Yates had to ride into town for supplies, and when he returned late in the afternoon, he found Diana in tears at the kitchen table. His heart lurched with fear. What happened? Is Rose all right? Rose is fine. She is napping. Diana wiped her eyes with her apron. Mrs. Patterson came by while you were gone. Yates felt cold dread settle in his stomach. What did she want? She brought gossip from town. They are saying terrible things about us, Yates. They are saying Rose is the product of an affair I had with a married man. They are saying you only married me because I was pregnant, and you are too honorable to let a woman suffer alone. They are saying the baby will probably grow up to be just like her mother, a woman of loose morals. Anger surged through Yates, hot and fierce. Did you tell Mrs. Patterson the truth? I tried. She said she believes me, but the damage is done. The whole town has decided what kind of woman I am. They have decided what kind of child Rose will be. Diana's voice broke. I did not want this for her. I wanted her to have a normal life, to be accepted. Instead, she will grow up with people whispering about her. Yates pulled a chair close to Diana and sat down, taking her hands in his. Listen to me. Rose will grow up loved and protected. She will grow up knowing her worth has nothing to do with what small-minded people say about her. We will teach her to be strong and proud. That is all that matters. But the gossip will die down eventually. Something else will happen and they will find someone new to talk about. Until then, we have each other. We have this ranch in our family. Let the rest of the world think whatever it wants. Diana looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. You really believe that? I do. And I will fight anyone who dares to insult you or Rose to my face. That is a promise. A small smile touched Diana's lips. You cannot fight the whole town. Watch me. She laughed and squeezed his hands. Thank you for defending us, for caring about Rose like she is your own. I do not know what we would have done without you. You would have found another way. You are too stubborn to give up. Maybe, but I am glad I did not have to. Diana hesitated, then leaned forward and kissed his cheek. It was brief and soft, but it sent a jolt through Yates that lingered long after she pulled away. You are a good man, Yates Kincaid. I am lucky to have you as my husband. Yates could not find words past the sudden tightness in his throat, so he just nodded. Diana stood and went to check on Rose, leaving him sitting at the table with his heart pounding. That small kiss had unlocked something in him, a longing he had been trying to keep buried. He was falling in love with his wife. Probably had been since the moment she collapsed on his porch. The realization was both terrifying and wonderful. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the world. Snow melted into rushing creeks, and the brown grass gave way to green. Wildflowers bloomed in riot of color across the valley, and Yates's cattle grew fat on the new growth. He worked dawn to dusk repairing fences and checking on newborn calves, and came home every evening to a warm house, and a family that felt more real with each passing day. Rose was 4 months old now, fat and healthy, with a smile that lit up her whole face. She laughed when Yates tickled her and reached for him when he came through the door. Diana had fully recovered her strength and then some, and she threw herself into improving the ranch house with determined energy. She planted a garden, sewed new curtains, and somehow made the rough cabin feel like a real home. They had fallen into an easy domesticity that Yates treasured. Diana still slept in her own room, but she had stopped being shy around him. She touched him casually now, a hand on his arm when she passed him something, her shoulder brushing his when they sat together after supper. Each small touch felt like a gift, evidence that she was growing comfortable with him, maybe even beginning to care for him. One evening in late April, after they had put Rose to bed, Diana asked him to come outside with her. The sun was setting in brilliant orange and pink, painting the mountains with fire. They walked together to the top of the small rise behind the house, where you could see the whole valley spread out below. "I love it here," Diana said softly. "When I first came to Idaho, I thought it was harsh and lonely, but now I see the beauty in it, the way the light changes with the seasons. The vastness of the sky, it feels like freedom. It is freedom. That is why my father chose this place. He wanted land that was his that nobody could take away. He wanted to build something that would last. You have done that. This ranch is solid and strong. You should be proud." "I am proud of what we have built," Yates corrected. "It is not just my ranch anymore, Diana. It is ours, yours and mine and Rose's." Diana turned to look at him, and the dying sunlight caught in her hair, turning it gold. "Do you ever regret it, taking us in?" "Never, not for a single second. Even though you got stuck with a wife you did not choose and a baby who is not yours." "I chose you," Yates said firmly. "Maybe not in the traditional way, but I still chose you. And Rose is mine in every way that matters. I could not love her more if she was my blood." Diana's eyes were shining. "Yates, I need to tell you something. I have been afraid to say it because I did not want to make things complicated or put pressure on you, but I cannot keep it inside anymore." His heart started to pound. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been for a while, and I was too stubborn to admit it. You are kind and patient, and you work so hard to give us a good life. You make me laugh. You make me feel safe. When you come through the door at the end of the day, my whole world feels right again." She took a shaky breath. "I know we married for practical reasons, but my feelings have become anything but practical. I love you, Yates. I need you to know that." The words hit him like a physical force, knocking the breath from his lungs. For a moment he could only stare at her, trying to comprehend that this beautiful, brave woman loved him. Then he was moving, closing the space between them, cupping her face in his work-roughened hands. "I love you too," he said hoarsely. "God, Diana, I have loved you almost from the beginning. I was just afraid to say it because I did not want to scare you away. You are everything I never knew I needed. You brought life and light into my house and into my heart. I love you so much it terrifies me." Diana laughed and cried at the same time, and then she was kissing him, really kissing him, not the brief touch on the cheek, but a real kiss full of promise and passion. Yates pulled her close and kissed her back with all the pent-up longing of the past months. She fit perfectly in his arms, soft and warm and wholly his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I want you to share my room tonight, if you are ready. No pressure, but I want to fall asleep with you in my arms. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of our lives." "Yes," Diana whispered. "Yes, I want that too." They walked back to the house hand in hand as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. That night, after checking on Rose one last time, Diana came to Yates's room wearing her nightgown and a shy smile. He welcomed her into his bed with gentle hands and tender kisses, showing her with his body what he could barely express in words. They made love slowly, learning each other, and afterward Diana fell asleep in his arms with her head on his chest. Yates lay awake for a long time, listening to her breathe and feeling more content than he ever had in his life. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days of sun and hard work. Yates spent most of his time on the range with his cattle, but he always made sure to come home for supper. Diana would be waiting with food on the table and Rose in her arms, and the sight never failed to make him smile. Their love deepened and grew, becoming the bedrock of their lives. They had their share of small arguments, usually about Yates working too hard or Diana doing too much, but they always resolved them quickly. Neither of them wanted to waste time on anger when they could be happy together instead. Rose grew into a fat, happy baby who babbled constantly and pulled herself up on furniture. She had Diana's honey-colored eyes and Yates's dark hair, though of course she shared no blood with either of them. But when people in town saw them together, they often remarked on the resemblance, and Yates took quiet satisfaction in that. Rose was his daughter in every way that mattered. The gossip in town did eventually die down, helped along by a scandal involving the mayor and an embezzling scheme that gave people something new to talk about. Mrs. Patterson spread the true story of Rose's parentage to anyone who would listen, defending Diana's honor with fierce determination. Slowly, grudgingly, the town began to accept the Kincaid family. Women started greeting Diana on the street again and inviting her to church socials. It was not perfect acceptance, but it was progress. In August, Diana discovered she was pregnant. She told Yates one evening after they had put Rose to bed, her face glowing with joy and nerves. "Are you happy?" she asked. "I know we have our hands full with Rose already." Yates picked her up and spun her around, making her shriek with laughter. "Happy, Diana, I am over the moon. Our family is growing. How could I be anything but thrilled?" The pregnancy was not easy. Diana suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, barely able to keep anything down. Yates hired a woman from town to come help with the housework, and Rose so Diana could rest. He worried constantly, remembering his mother's difficult pregnancy and the brother who had not survived. But Diana was young and strong, and by her second trimester, the sickness faded and she bloomed with health. They spent the winter preparing for the new baby, adding on another room to the house and building a second crib. Rose was walking now, toddling around on unsteady legs and getting into everything. She kept them endlessly entertained with her antics and her attempts at words. Dada was her first clear word, directed at Yates while he was fixing the fence one afternoon, and he had to sit down hard on the ground, overcome with emotion. Diana went into labor on a cold March morning in 1884, almost exactly a year after they had married. The midwife came from town, the same old German woman who had taught Diana her trade. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Yates paced the house with Rose in his arms, both of them frightened by Diana's cries of pain. He had never felt so helpless in his life. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, he heard the thin cry of a newborn baby. He rushed to the bedroom door, his heart in his throat, and found the midwife smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Kincaid, a big, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but well." Yates entered the room on shaking legs. Diana was propped up in bed, looking exhausted and beautiful, holding a squalling bundle wrapped in blankets. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Yates, come meet your son." He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. The infant had a red, wrinkled face and a surprising amount of dark hair. He was crying lustily, his tiny fists waving in the air. Yates reached out one finger and the baby immediately grabbed it, his crying stopping as he focused on this new sensation. "He is perfect," Yates said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. God, Diana, I was so scared. I know, I could hear you pacing. You wore a path in the floor." Diana shifted the baby so Yates could hold him. "We need to name him. What do you think?" They had discussed names for months without settling on anything. But looking at his son now, Yates knew exactly what felt right. Thomas, after my father, Thomas Kincaid. Thomas, Diana repeated softly. I like that. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to your family. Rose met her new brother that afternoon, toddling over to peer at him with wide eyes. Baby, she said clearly, patting Thomas's head with surprising gentleness. She accepted her new sibling with the easy adaptability of young children, and within days, she was trying to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding time. Life settled into a new rhythm. Yates worked the ranch with renewed purpose, knowing he was building a legacy for his children. Diana juggled caring for two small children with running the household, and somehow she made it look effortless. They were tired all the time, constantly busy, but they were happy. Their love had grown deep roots, nourished by shared work and shared joy. The years passed in a blur of seasons and small moments. Rose grew into a bright, curious child who followed Yates everywhere and asked endless questions about the ranch. Thomas was quieter, more serious, but he had a smile that could light up a room. Diana was pregnant again when Rose was 5 and Thomas 2, this time with twins that they did not discover until the babies were born. 2 more boys, identical and inseparable from the start, named Samuel and James. The house felt full to bursting with 4 children running around, but Yates would not have changed a thing. He had built on 2 more rooms and a proper kitchen, transforming the small cabin into a real home. The ranch prospered too, his cattle herd doubling in size as he bought up land from neighbors who were giving up on the hard frontier life. Rose started school in town when she was 6, riding in with Yates when he made supply runs. She was a quick learner, smart as a whip, and her teacher said she was one of the best students he had ever taught. The other children accepted her without question, and if any of them had heard the old gossip about her parentage, they did not care. She was simply Rose Kincaid, daughter of Yates and Diana, sister to Thomas and the twins. One evening, when Rose was 8 years old, she asked Diana about where she came from. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, just the 2 of them while Yates wrangled the boys inside for bedtime. Mama, Sally Thompson said I do not look like you or Papa. She said maybe I am adopted. What does that mean? Diana felt her heart clench. She had known this day would come eventually, but it still hurt. Adopted is when a child goes to live with a family that is not the one they were born to. Rose was quiet for a moment, processing this. Is that what I am? Adopted, in a way, yes, but you are also just ours. Let me tell you the whole story. Diana pulled Rose close and told her everything. About her mother dying in childbirth, about her father rejecting her, about Diana taking her and fleeing into a blizzard, about Yates opening his door and his heart to them both. Your papa chose you, Diana finished. He did not have to. He could have turned us away like everyone else did. But he looked at you and he saw his daughter. He loved you from the very first moment, and he has loved you every day since. Rose was crying silently, big tears rolling down her cheeks. My real mama died. Yes, sweetheart, but she loved you very much. She died bringing you into the world, and that is the greatest love there is. She gave her life for yours. And my other papa did not want me. He was wrong. He was so very wrong. You are wonderful and special, and anyone would be lucky to have you as their daughter. Your papa, Yates, he knows that. We both know that. Do Thomas and Samuel and James know I am not really their sister? You are really their sister. Blood does not make a family, Rose. Love does. You are as much a Kincaid as any of us. That will never change. Rose threw her arms around Diana's neck and held on tight. I love you, Mama, and I love Papa too. I am glad I am here. I am glad you saved me. Me too, baby, me too. They sat together until the stars came out, and when Yates came looking for them, he found them holding each other on the porch swing. Diana told him about the conversation later that night, and he held her while she cried for the pain their daughter had to carry. "Should we tell the boys?" Diana asked. "Eventually, when they are old enough to understand, but Rose, she needed to know the truth. I am glad she does. Now there are no secrets between us." Yates kissed Diana's forehead. "You handled it perfectly. Rose knows she is loved. That is all that matters." Time continued its steady march. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman, thoughtful and kind, with a gift for healing that reminded Yates of Diana. She studied medicine from books Diana ordered from back east and helped deliver babies when women in town needed a midwife. Thomas became Yates's right hand on the ranch, taking to cattle work like he was born to it. Samuel and James were inseparable, two halves of a whole, and they had a gift for breaking horses that earned them a reputation across 3 counties. Diana had one more baby when she was 35, a daughter they named Grace. She was the baby of the family, sweet and spoiled by her older siblings. The house rang with laughter and arguments, with the sounds of a large family living their lives together. On a spring evening in 1900, 18 years after that fateful blizzard, Yates and Diana sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Rose had married a doctor from Pocatello and had 3 children of her own. She visited often, bringing her family to stay at the ranch for weeks at a time. Thomas was married too, to a girl from town, and they were expecting their first child. The twins were courting a pair of sisters and planning a double wedding for the fall. Grace, at 14, was already breaking hearts all over the county. "Can you believe this is our life?" Diana asked, leaning against Yates's shoulder. They were both gray now, their faces lined from years of hard work and sun, but their love had only deepened with time. "Some days I still cannot believe you knocked on my door," Yates said. "It feels like a dream, the best dream I ever had. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had turned us away?" "Never, because I know I would not have. Even drunk and half asleep, even thinking you were trouble, I could not have left you out in that storm. Something in me knew you were supposed to be here, that Rose was supposed to be here, that we were supposed to build this life together." Diana turned to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Yates Kincaid. You saved my life that night. You saved Rose's life. You gave us everything." "No," Yates said firmly. "You gave me everything. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning. You turned a house into a home and a man into a father and husband. I was barely living before you came along. Now I am truly alive." Rose came up onto the porch then, carrying her youngest daughter. "Papa, Mama, are you two getting sentimental again?" "Always," Yates said with a grin. He held out his arms for his granddaughter, who came to him eagerly. She had Diana's honey-colored eyes passed down through Rose. "We have earned the right to be sentimental." "That you have," Rose said softly. She looked at her parents with so much love it was almost painful. "Thank you both, for everything, for giving me a life, for teaching me what family really means, for showing me that love is a choice we make every day." "You never have to thank us," Diana said. "You are our daughter. Loving you was the easiest thing we ever did." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, 3 generations of Kincaids gathered on the porch. They told stories and laughed together, bound by blood and by choice, by the love that had started with a knock on the door during a blizzard 18 years ago. The ranch continued to thrive. Yates expanded the cattle operation until it was one of the largest in southeast Idaho. He built a new house, bigger and more comfortable, but he insisted on keeping the original cabin standing as a reminder of where they had started. Diana became known throughout the region as the best midwife in 3 counties, and she trained both Rose and Grace in her skills. Together, they helped bring hundreds of babies safely into the world, carrying on a legacy of compassion and care. Rose's children grew up running wild on the ranch alongside their cousins, learning to ride and rope and work the land. Thomas took over more of the daily operations as Yates aged, but the old cowboy never fully retired. He was happiest on horseback, checking his herds, and he continued riding until he was well into his 70s. Diana's health remained strong despite the hard work of raising 6 children and helping with countless grandchildren. She and Yates grew old together, their love only strengthening with each passing year. They had their share of hardships, drought years and harsh winters, sickness and loss, but they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other and from the family they had built. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Diana with a trip to San Francisco, the first time either of them had left Idaho in years. They stayed in a fancy hotel and ate at restaurants and saw the ocean for the first time. But by the end of the week, they were both homesick for the ranch, for the mountains and the big sky and the life they had made. "I do not need adventures," Diana said as they rode the train home. "Everything I need is at the ranch with you." "Same for me," Yates agreed, "though this was nice. We should do it again in another 30 years. Diana laughed and took his hand. "It is a deal." The 20th century brought changes to the West. Towns grew into cities, railroads connected distant places, and the wild frontier slowly became more civilized. But the Kincaid Ranch remained a constant, a place where family came first and hard work was valued. Yates taught his sons and grandsons the lessons his father had taught him about the land, about perseverance, about building something that would last. Rose became a sought-after physician, working alongside her husband to bring modern medicine to rural Idaho. She never forgot that she had been an unwanted baby, and she made it her mission to help vulnerable women and children. She opened a clinic that treated patients regardless of their ability to pay, funded largely by money from the ranch. Diana worked beside her whenever she could, the two of them a formidable team. When Rose turned 40, she told Diana and Yates something she had never shared before. "I have spent years wondering about my birth father, where he went, if he ever regretted rejecting me. I hired a detective to find him a few years ago." "Did you find him?" Yates asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes, he died 10 years ago, alone and broke. He drank himself to death in some town in Montana. He never remarried, never had other children." Rose looked at her parents. "I felt nothing when I heard that. No satisfaction, no sadness, nothing. Because he was never my father. You were, Papa. You have always been my father in every way that matters." Yates pulled Rose into his arms, this daughter of his heart. "I have been so blessed to have you in my life. Watching you grow up, seeing the incredible woman and doctor you have become, it is the greatest joy I have ever known." "I am who I am because of you and Mama," Rose said firmly. "You taught me that love is a choice and family is what we make it. Those lessons have shaped my entire life." As Yates reached his 80th birthday, he began to slow down despite his protests. His joints ached in the cold and he could no longer ride as far as he used to. Diana, at 78, had her own aches and pains, but she was still sharp as ever. They spent most of their time on the porch of the big house, watching their great-grandchildren play, receiving visits from their sprawling family. One evening in late fall, Yates and Diana sat together watching the sunset, wrapped in blankets against the chill. The mountains were dusted with early snow and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. "You remember that first blizzard?" Yates asked. "When you knocked on my door, how could I forget? It was the night my life changed forever. Mine too. I was so alone before you came. I thought I was content, but I was really just existing. You taught me how to live." Diana squeezed his hand. "We taught each other. I was desperate and terrified and ready to give up. You showed me that there was still good in the world, still people worth believing in. You gave Rose and me everything." "I got the better end of the deal," Yates insisted. "A beautiful wife, 6 children, more grandchildren and great-grandchildren than I can count, a successful ranch, a life full of love. All because I opened my door on a snowy night. Best decision I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The house behind them glowed with warm light, and they could hear the sounds of dinner being prepared, multiple generations of Kincaids gathering together as they did most evenings. "Yates," Diana said softly, "I want you to know that if I had to do it all over again, if I had to walk through that blizzard 100 times, I would, because it led me to you. You are the love of my life. You always will be." Yates turned to kiss her, tender and sweet despite their years. "And you are mine. Forever and always, Diana. You and Rose and all our children. You are my everything." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they made their way inside to join their family. The table was laden with food and surrounded by the people they loved most. Rose was there with her husband and grown children. Thomas and his wife had come over with their brood. The twins and their families were laughing together at one end of the table. Grace sat with her husband and their teenagers, all of them talking over each other in the comfortable way of a large family. At the head of the table, Yates looked around at all these people who carried his name and his legacy. Then he looked at Diana beside him, still beautiful in his eyes, still the woman who had changed everything. She smiled at him and he smiled back, and in that moment he felt the weight of a life well lived, of love freely given and received. "Let us say grace," he said, and everyone quieted down. "Thank you for this food, for this family, for the roof over our heads and the land beneath our feet. Thank you for bringing Diana and Rose to my door on that winter night 38 years ago and for every moment since. Amen." "Amen," chorused around the table, and then everyone was talking and laughing again, passing plates and sharing stories. Yates ate his dinner surrounded by the people he loved and felt more grateful than words could express. The years continued to pass with increasing speed. Yates and Diana celebrated their 40th anniversary, then their 50th. Their children were all grown with families of their own. Their grandchildren had children. The Kincaid Ranch had become an institution in the region, known for quality cattle and for the strong family that ran it. Through it all, Yates and Diana remained devoted to each other. They had weathered every storm together, literal and metaphorical. They had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love and hard work and family that would continue for generations. When Yates was 87 and Diana 85, they made the decision to move into a smaller house on the property, leaving the big house to Thomas and his family. It was the right thing to do, passing the torch to the next generation, but it felt strange after so many years. On their last night in the big house, they walked through the empty rooms together, remembering. This was where they had raised their children, where they had loved and laughed and cried. Every room held 1,000 memories. "No regrets?" Diana asked as they stood in what had been their bedroom. "Not a single one. You. Only that we cannot live it all over again. But then, we have been so blessed already. We have had more happiness than most people see in 10 lifetimes." They moved into the small house the next day, bringing only what they needed. It was cozy and comfortable, with a big porch where they could sit and watch the ranch continue without them. It was an adjustment, stepping back from the daily operations, but it also brought a kind of peace. They had done their part. Now it was time to rest and enjoy the fruits of their labor. Rose visited every week, bringing news and medicines to help with their various ailments. She was in her 50s now, her hair more gray than gold, but she still had Diana's honey eyes and gentle manner. Seeing her never failed to fill Yates with profound gratitude. This woman, who had come into his life as an unwanted baby, had become a pillar of their community and a source of endless pride. "You know," Rose said one afternoon as she checked Diana's blood pressure, "I have been thinking about writing down our story. How you saved me and Mama. How you built this family from nothing. I think it is a story worth preserving." "People do not care about old ranchers and their wives," Yates protested. "I care. Your grandchildren care. Your great-grandchildren should know where they come from, the courage it took to build all this." "Please, Papa, let me write it down." So Rose wrote their story, interviewing both Yates and Diana for hours, capturing details that might otherwise have been lost. She wrote about the blizzard and the desperate young woman and the cowboy who said, "I want you both forever." She wrote about their unconventional marriage and their growing love. She wrote about the family they had built and the legacy they were leaving. When the manuscript was finished, Rose read it aloud to her parents. By the end, all three of them were crying. "You made us sound heroic," Diana said through tears. "We were just ordinary people doing the best we could." "That is what makes it heroic," Rose replied. "You chose love when it would have been easier to choose fear. You built a family on foundations of compassion and acceptance. You taught all of us what really matters in life. If that is not heroic, I do not know what is." The manuscript became a treasured family document, copied and passed down through generations. It ensured that future Kincaids would know the story of Yates and Diana, the cowboy and the woman who knocked on his door with a baby nobody wanted. Yates's health began to fail in his 89th year. His heart was wearing out, the doctor said, after a lifetime of hard work and hard living. He spent most of his days in bed or in his chair on the porch, with Diana always nearby. She read to him from the newspaper, told him stories about their grandchildren, held his hand and reminded him of the life they had lived together. One morning in late spring, with wildflowers blooming across the valley, Yates woke to find Diana sitting beside his bed with tears on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right. I am just so grateful we had all this time together. So many years of love and happiness. Not everyone gets that." Yates reached for her hand. "Come lie beside me." Diana climbed carefully into the bed and snuggled against his side, fitting into the curves of his body the way she had for more than 5 decades. They lay together in the morning light, listening to the sounds of the ranch waking up outside their window. "I love you," Yates said. "From that first night to this moment, you have been my greatest blessing. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. You made my life worth living." "I love you too," Diana whispered. "More than words can say. You saved me, Yates. You saved Rose. You gave us a beautiful life. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for everything." They fell asleep holding each other, and when Yates woke again, it was afternoon and Rose was there with several of his sons. The end was coming soon, he realized. He could feel it in his bones, a deep tiredness that no amount of rest could cure. His family gathered around him over the next few days. All 6 of his children came, along with most of his grandchildren and even some great-grandchildren. They filled the small house and spilled out onto the porch, everyone wanting to say goodbye to the man who had been the foundation of their family. Rose sat by his bedside for hours, holding his hand. "Thank you, Papa," she said through tears. "Thank you for opening your door on that snowy night. Thank you for being my father when my birth father would not. Thank you for teaching me what love really means. I would not be who I am without you. You would have been extraordinary no matter what," Yates said, his voice weak but certain, "but I am grateful I got to be your papa. It has been the greatest honor of my life." Each of his children came to say their goodbyes, sharing memories and expressing gratitude. Thomas thanked him for teaching him to ranch and to be a good husband and father. The twins credited him with showing them the importance of hard work and integrity. Grace, his baby, cried and told him he was the best father anyone could ask for. Through it all, Diana stayed by his side, leaving only when absolutely necessary. She bathed his face with cool cloths, helped him sip water, and whispered words of love into his ear. On a clear morning in May, with the sun streaming through the windows and his whole family gathered around, Yates Kincaid took his last breath. Diana was holding his hand, and his children surrounded the bed, and the last thing he saw was the faces of the people he loved most in the world. The funeral was the largest Malad city had ever seen. People came from 5 counties to pay their respects to Yates Kincaid, the rancher who had built an empire through honest work and treated everyone with fairness and respect. But more than that, they came to honor a man who had opened his door on a snowy night and changed countless lives through that one act of compassion. Diana stood at the graveside with her children and grandchildren around her, and she thought about that desperate girl who had knocked on a stranger's door. She thought about the cowboy who had said, "I want you both forever," and meant it with his whole heart. She thought about 52 years of marriage, of love that had only grown deeper with time, of the beautiful family they had created together. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind, knowing somehow that Yates could hear her. "Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for forever." Diana lived another 7 years, staying sharp and active until the end. She remained in the small house surrounded by family, spending her days with her children and grandchildren, tending her garden and sharing stories about Yates. She never remarried. She always said she had found her great love, and one was enough for any lifetime. She passed away peacefully in her sleep at 92, and was buried beside Yates on a hillside overlooking the ranch. At her funeral, Rose read from the manuscript she had written, telling the story of how her parents had met and fallen in love. There was not a dry eye in the crowd. The Kincaid Ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's leadership, and then his children's and grandchildren's. It remained in the family for generations, a testament to the legacy Yates and Diana had built. The story of the blizzard and the unwanted baby and the cowboy who said, "I want you both forever," became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. Rose lived to be 95, becoming a beloved matriarch in her own right. She practiced medicine until she was 80, helping thousands of patients over her long career. She made sure every one of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren knew the story of their heritage, of the courage and compassion that had founded their family. On the ranch, they eventually turned the original cabin into a museum of sorts, preserving it exactly as it had been when Yates and Diana lived there. Visitors could see the fireplace where Diana had warmed herself that first night, the bedroom where their children had been born, the porch where they had sat together for decades watching the sun set over the mountains. Above the door, someone carved an inscription based on Rose's manuscript. Here love began on a winter night when a cowboy opened his door and his heart to a woman and baby nobody wanted. What he built with them changed the world. The story of Yates and Diana Kincaid spread beyond the family. It was published in local newspapers, included in books about Idaho history, told in classrooms as an example of compassion in the Old West. It became a reminder that a single act of kindness could ripple through generations, that love was always worth choosing, that family was built on more than blood. Their great-great-grandchildren still ranch the same land today, more than a century later. They raise cattle using methods passed down from Yates, tempered with modern knowledge. They gather for holidays and celebrations in numbers that would astound their ancestors. They tell stories about the cowboy and the woman who knocked on his door, keeping that memory alive. The small grave marker that Rose had placed for her birth mother was moved to the hillside where Yates and Diana were buried. So the woman who had died bringing Rose into the world could finally rest near the family her sacrifice had helped create. It seemed fitting that she should be part of the legacy, her courage honored alongside theirs. In the end, what Yates and Diana built was more than a successful ranch or a large family. They built a legacy of love and acceptance, of choosing compassion over convenience, of keeping promises and honoring commitments. They showed that family was not defined by blood, but by the choice to love and support each other through every hardship and joy. Their story became a guiding light for their descendants, a reminder of where they came from and what values they should carry forward. When faced with difficult decisions, Kincaids would often ask themselves, what would Yates and Diana do? The answer was always the same. Choose love, choose family, choose to help even when it was hard. The ranch itself became a symbol of their legacy. It was a place where orphan children found homes, where struggling families found work and dignity, where anyone in need could find a helping hand. The Kincaids never forgot that their family had started with an act of desperate hope on a winter night, and they made sure to extend that same hope to others. Years turned to decades, decades to a century, and still the story persisted. In an age of fast communication and instant gratification, there was something powerful about a tale of enduring love and chosen family. People needed to hear that kindness mattered, that opening your door to someone in need could change the world, that love freely given would be returned 1,000-fold. And so the legend of Yates Kincaid, the cowboy who said, "I want you both forever," lived on. It lived in the ranch that still bore his name, in the hundreds of descendants who carried his values, in the community that remembered his generosity, and in the hearts of everyone who heard the story and thought, "I want to love like that. I want to build something that will last." That was the true legacy of that frozen winter night in 1882, when a desperate woman knocked on a stranger's door and found not just shelter but a lifetime of love. It was proof that one person's courage and another person's compassion could create ripples that lasted forever, touching lives that would never know the original story but would benefit from its effects all the same. The small house where Yates and Diana spent their final years still stands, maintained by the family as a reminder of where it all led. Inside, photographs line the walls chronicling a century of Kincaid family history. But the most prominent photograph, enlarged and framed above the fireplace, shows Yates and Diana on their 50th anniversary. They are old in the picture, faces lined with age, but they are looking at each other with such love and joy that it transcends time. Beneath the photograph, a small plaque reads, "Love is a choice we make every day. Choose wisely." That photograph and that message encapsulated everything they had learned and lived. Love was not something that just happened. It was something you built through daily decisions, through choosing your partner over and over again, through facing hardships together and celebrating joys as one. Yates had chosen Diana and Rose on that winter night, and he had continued choosing them every day for the rest of his life. Diana had chosen to trust a stranger with her life and her baby's life, and then had chosen to love that stranger with all her heart. Those choices had created a legacy that would never die in the end, The story of Yates and Diana was a love story for the ages, but it was also more than that. It was a story about family, about courage, about the transformative power of compassion. It was about building something meaningful in a harsh world, about finding joy in simple things, about leaving the world better than you found it. And it all started with a knock on a door during a blizzard, and a cowboy brave enough to answer it with an open heart.